For practically the entirety of the 2000s, One Piece, as a manga and an anime, was not really so popular in English-speaking countries, especially compared to the rest of the world. It was often incredibly far behind Bleach, Death Note, and especially Naruto in terms of popularity and sales. But wait, how can that be? Especially if you checked out any anime-centric spaces such as conventions, the manga section at Barnes & Noble, or even just looked on Crunchyroll's app. You would notice that not only is One Piece everywhere, it's one of the best-selling anime and manga properties. So what changed? One Piece has an incredibly fascinating history here in the US that I'm really passionate about, and I've been rooting for it since 2005. I've seen it go from underdog to king, but the journey has been long and difficult. So today, instead of the One Piece anime and the culture surrounding it, I'll be talking specifically about the manga since that has its own history as well, and I don't want the community to forget just how far we've come. So let's dive in. This is the complete history of the One Piece manga in the US. Before I get started, I want to take a moment to thank my channel members. This video's shoutout goes to Doomhorse. Thanks for being such a cool dude, Doom. I really appreciate you. And if you'd like to have your name featured here and have a possible shoutout, please consider becoming a member by hitting the join button. Also, thank you to my patrons too. The support means a lot, and it allows me to keep creating content. And even if you can't become a member, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. It all helps so much. And without further ado, let's get back to the video. One Piece reached American shores for the first time on November 26, 2002 in Shonen Jump magazine alongside Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Sandland. The magazine, published by Viz, would release each month in the US as opposed to the weekly format that was the standard in Japan. And instead of one chapter per week like in Japan, the American edition would publish a handful of chapters in each monthly magazine. Eventually, with enough chapters translated, they would be compiled into a volume, and One Piece Volume 1 would be released in bookstores on June 30th, 2003. And what made One Piece stick out, especially compared to other titles such as Naruto and Dragon Ball, is One Piece's logo and numbering would have a fancy gold foil, and each number's color would often reflect the unique color of each respective Japanese volume. The gold foil wasn't just unique to Volume 1 either, each subsequent volume that released had it too. And personally, I thought that this was a really creative choice. I'm assuming it was done to resemble Gold Treasure, which is something that Funimation would, by sheer coincidence, go on to do with their unique logo a few years later when they licensed the anime. I always thought it was really cool how One Piece in America was all gold and stuff. It felt unique and special. The only bad part about the logo, though, is Viz decided to tack on One Piece above the actual logo's title. They did this to prevent confusion, as One Piece's logo is incredibly stylized. I guess they didn't want anyone to misread it as Nepes, but ironically, someone could always think the title is One Piece One Piece. Either way, that part of the logo is kinda messy, but I guess I get why they did it. The same text for One Piece is on the spine as well, so I guess Viz didn't have faith in their audience to just tell what the title was based off the spine alone. Also, what was really cool about this era is Viz decided to include each respective volume's title on the cover as well, right beneath the logo, just like in the Japanese version. Translation-wise, it's all over the place. Early on, it's pretty serviceable, but Viz often threw in a bunch of pirate lingo. Think "yar" and "mateys" and all that junk. They were often pretty much against swearing as well, so in really serious moments where you think damn or hell could have been dropped, you got characters yelling "darn it!" just making serious moments feel kind of underwhelming, but the reader could always just fill in or adjust what's being said in their head. It's what I often did. Names weren't an issue either. Monkey D. Luffy was kept, and so was Nami, Usopp, and Roronoa Zoro. Which brings me to my next point. In late 2004, to be consistent with the 4Kids English dub of the anime, Viz would retroactively change Zoro's name to Zolo. For those of you who do not know, 4Kids was known for making a ton of heavy edits, and they often changed names and terminology in One Piece, with Zoro becoming Zolo being the most notorious of what they've done. Given that it was early on enough with just 4 volumes printed at the time, Viz went back and changed Zoro's name to Zolo in every printing of volumes 1 to 4, and he was just straight up called Zolo starting with volume 5 and on. So, that means volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4, with Zoro still being called Zoro, is still out there. You just gotta make sure you find an early enough printing. I started collecting my One Piece manga volumes in 2005, so I was fortunate enough that volumes 2 and 3 that I bought at my local comic book shop were first printings, and therefore Zoro's name was kept. I wasn't so lucky with volumes 1 and 4 though, as the copies I have were printed right after the 4Kids dub came out, so he's still called Zolo in those. But hey, I'm just glad that I have any of these at all. And Zolo was not the only 4Kidsism that made its way in. Some name changes and weird spellings got included as well, such as using Portgas with a Z at the end of it, becoming Portgaz, or Teach being spelled with 2 E's. It's really weird. Other examples include Coco Village instead of Kokoyashi Village, Rogue Town instead of Log Town, and Merry-Go instead of Going Merry. Merry-Go is definitely an interesting choice since in Japanese, it's called the Going Merry-Go, with the go being an honorific in Japanese often used for vehicles. It's sort of like using san or kun or chan for characters, but in One Piece they use the honorific go for ships. Because it's just called the Merry-Go in the English translation of the manga, its name was made into a pun on merry-go-rounds. I really do think that this was unintentional on Oda's part for going merry-go to resemble merry-go-round, but it's kind of neat nonetheless. As for Rogue Town, I guess the translators wanted to be on the nose that pirates often pass through. Its original name, Logtown, borrows the first half of its name from prologue and epilogue, since Logtown is known for being the town of the beginning and the end. Coincidentally, not only is Logtown Gold Roger's place of birth and place of death, it's precisely where the new age of piracy technically began. Thankfully, there are some 4Kids terms that Viz didn't go with, the biggest ones being Ace's given name. For some reason, his surname Portgaz was borrowed from 4Kids, but thank God they didn't go with Trace. Yeah, in the 4Kids dub, Ace is named Portgaz D. Trace. What a mess. Thankfully, they did not go with Chaser for Smoker either. On November 8th, 2005, Viz would publish One Piece Color Walk 1, an art book full of color art by Ichiro Oda, along with some other bonus content in it such as interviews. After Color Walk 1 released, that was kind of it, with the subsequent color walks nowhere to be found. Maybe it didn't do well. The regular manga was still releasing, but to me, as a fan at the time, it felt like One Piece wasn't really a priority for Viz. One Piece would continue to release about 3 to 4 volumes a year, which is about 30 to 40 chapters on average annually. At this time, Eiichiro Oda was publishing about 45 chapters a year for One Piece, so at this rate, the manga would keep a steady release pace behind Japan, with it slowly but surely slipping behind. For example, the English version of Volume 7 was the first new volume published as I started to buy them, and it was released on July 5th, 2005, which puts it right in the middle of the Baratier arc. And at the same time in Japan, Volume 38 had just released, which was at the tail end of Water 7. That meant One Piece was about 30 volumes behind. This only got more frustrating when Viz started to do a Naruto speed-up in 2007, which was a similar distance behind its Japanese release. This Naruto speed-up didn't bring it up to date with Japan, but it sure did make it a hell of a lot closer. From September to December 2007, Viz would publish 3 volumes of Naruto per month, starting with volume 16 and ending at volume 27, the very last volume before the time skip, which was a really big deal at the time. To me, this Naruto speed-up felt unprecedented, and it blew my mind as a kid. The biggest takeaway from it, though, is if it could happen to Naruto, it could also happen to One Piece. So, with Naruto taking a big jump to be closer to its current material, that now makes it 14 volumes behind instead of 20. I know that doesn't really seem like a big jump, but when Naruto was still being published in the mid to late 2000s, that was a lot to cover, especially since Naruto was the only one getting this treatment, as the rest of Naruto's contemporaries published by Viz kept their distance from the Japanese release. And then again, starting in February 2009, Viz would do yet another speed up for Naruto, now publishing 4 volumes a month, going from volume 34 to 44 in just 3 calendar months. Naruto was now roughly only 2 to 3 volumes, or roughly a year, behind Japan. This was insane. It proved that not only could it be done for One Piece, but it didn't feel like a matter of if, but more so when. Just to give you an idea of how far behind One Piece really was, at this time when Naruto was at volume 45 in the US, One Piece was at volume 21 in the US, and volume 54 in Japan. That is 33 volumes, about a decade's worth of content. And now that Viz was all caught up with Naruto, which title would be next to receive the speed up treatment? Unfortunately, One Piece wasn't really that popular amongst the casual crowd of anime fans here in the United States, as a lot of damage was done by the 4Kids dub. You could definitely find hardcore fans on dedicated forums like Arlong Park, which was my personal favorite, and even MSN groups to read some pretty bad scanlations. But at school or in other public spaces, One Piece was just that ugly show that had a rap theme song, and Naruto and Dragon Ball were what kids wanted more of. These kids, the target audience, seem to have a lukewarm opinion of One Piece at best. It was also the majority of them, and that's what I'd call the casual audience. And I don't mean to say casual audience in a derogatory way. For any product to be successful, there needs to be a casual market, which are fans that like a product enough to spend money on it, but they aren't nearly as invested or knowledgeable as hardcore fans. In fact, hardcore fans usually make up an incredibly small amount of each fan base, and without the big casual fan base that spends money on it here and there, a One Piece speed up wouldn't be viable to a company like Viz. At the time, Naruto not only had a strong hardcore fan base, but it also had an incredibly strong casual fan base too, and it getting a second manga speed up proved that. So why am I comparing One Piece so heavily to Naruto? Naruto, at this time, was incredibly huge, and it was almost always the title that Viz would experiment with. It was a safe enough bet for Viz to see if catching up with Japan was a worthy investment, mostly to deter fans from reading illegal scanlations online. I mean, if a fan caught up with the physical US release of their favorite manga title, and they saw that there were at least 5 to 10 years worth of material afterwards that had yet to release, they would often make the jump to reading those illegal scanlations. That was a lot of potential money that Viz was technically losing out on. So, as I said, Naruto was about 2 to 3 volumes behind Japan. What about Bleach? Bleach was about 12 volumes behind Japan. And One Piece? One Piece was 33 to 34 volumes behind Japan. So, what does this mean? Would One Piece keep this insane distance? Or would there be a speed up? Oh man, our prayers were finally heard, because at Anime Expo 2009, Viz announced that they would finally do a One Piece speed up. This release schedule would prove to be far more ambitious than Naruto's speed up. Starting in January 2010, Viz would release 5 volumes of One Piece per month for 6 months straight, going from volume 24 and ending with volume 53. That's 30 volumes in just half a year. This means that once Alabasta was finished, they would start the speed up with the Skypiea arc in January, and by June, they would be at the end of the Amazon Lily arc. And then the next month in July, volume 54 would release, kicking off with Impel Down. Coincidentally, starting in January 2010 is when we would start to see the price of individual manga volumes increasing from $7.95 to $9.99 USD. So instead of spending $40 a month, it would now be $50 a month if you chose to buy every volume as they released. Although, there would be some new changes to what was previously established with One Piece's manga volumes. Starting with volume 24, Viz would drop the gold foil for the logo and volume number, and instead give each arc its own unique color scheme, which was likely done for two reasons. The gold foil was an expensive embellishment, and by giving each arc its own color scheme, it could work as a visual guide for new fans. Skypiea would be teal and green, Water 7 was dark and light blue, Thriller Bark was red and maroon, Sabaody was gray and black. Gone was the One Piece text above the logo that was previously there for legibility, and in its place was the title of each arc, in an effort to help guide new fans with the onslaught of new content. The title for each volume that used to be present under the logo was now gone too. Personally, I always liked the gold foil that volumes 1 to 23 had, but I suppose it makes sense why they got rid of it, considering the context behind the releases. Speaking of which, printings of volumes 1 to 23 that were originally published with the gold foil would then be replaced with similar formatting starting in 2010 for consistency and clarity. Volumes 1 to 11 would have a red and brown color scheme and have East blue at the top, and volumes 12 to 23 would be purple and salmon with Baroque works. The aforementioned monthly Shonen Jump magazine would also make the jump ahead too, technically a little bit earlier. But since they were skipping 30 volumes worth of content, in the December 2009 issue, they would make guides for each arc: Skypiea, Water 7, Thriller Bark, and Sabaody, to prepare its user base for the new arc. Additionally, this same issue included the first Romance Dawn one-shot, which was a cool bonus. And starting in the January 2010 issue, which would technically release a month or two earlier, it would jump ahead from the Alabasta arc to chapter 525, which was the very first chapter of Impel Down, continuing to release 2 to 3 chapters a month. And to entice fans to purchase the new One Piece volumes, Viz would include a special sticker on the first printing of certain volumes, that being volumes 24, 32, 36, 41, 46, 50, and 54. 2 issues of Shonen Jump also had some stickers as well. Each sticker featured a unique Straw Hat pirate and are rather hard to come across nowadays. At the tail end of 2009, Viz would release the first One Piece omnibus release, which are 3-in-1s sold for a much cheaper price, $14.99. The trade-off, though, for the cheaper prices is you don't get the full cover art for each volume, and the paper quality is much poorer, made thinner so 3 volumes worth of material could be condensed into a much smaller book. The pros outweigh the negative for some fans, as the omnibus releases would prove to be a great way for newer One Piece fans to catch up at not only a fraction of the price, but also a fraction of the shelf space. More options are always ideal. Now that we finally got Skypiea through Impel Down, what was the translation like? Most fans would agree that it was better for the most part, as a lot of the pirate lingo was pretty much nowhere to be seen. But one of the most controversial changes Viz made was with Enel, or Eneru, whatever you want to call him. Viz did their best to dance around using the word God as a title, and instead would use the Japanese word kami instead. Using the lowercase g, God, as a noun was acceptable, but Viz would not use it with a capital G as Enel's title. For example, Viz was comfortable with someone saying Enel is a god, but they wouldn't go with someone saying Enel is God, and instead it would simply be Enel is Kami, with Kami as a title not really being explained, if I remember correctly, but you'll eventually be able to tell what it means if you pick up on the context clues given throughout the arc. Everything else, aside from some weird line or two here or there, seemed to be okay. And so now, with One Piece's manga being 1 year behind Japan, where else was there for it to go? Did the people at Viz finally have the same kind of confidence in One Piece that they did for Naruto? In an August 2009 interview, some insight was given by Viz Media Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Gonzalo Ferreira. He claimed that retailers were incredibly supportive of the Naruto manga speed-up, so that set a precedent for the future. Viz decided to give it a go with One Piece since there was a vocal enough size of its fanbase. He was also asked if One Piece as a weaker property was a good financial decision, considering that it would be asking a lot of its smaller fanbase in the US to go spend more money. "We'll see," is the answer he replied. He said Viz had confidence in One Piece, but the goal was to grow it even more so fans could go back and start with Volume 1. In February 2011, Cross Epoch, which is a short crossover between Dragon Ball and One Piece, would be published in issue 100 of Shonen Jump. Both Akira Toriyama and Eiichiro Oda worked on it together, with Oda doing the coloring. It's a fun little story, and it was really cool to finally have it printed in English. In December 2011, Viz announced a digital manga speedup for One Piece, making all English volumes in print now available for purchase digitally. It was a really good decision considering that anime and manga was now bigger than ever, and lots of anime fans were catching up with their favorite titles online. This was a sign for what was soon to come. The end of the physical Shonen Jump magazine, with its final issue being March 2012. A physical monthly release with titles that were incredibly far behind Japan proved to be archaic, as most fans with the internet were using it for illegal scanlations. By allowing these titles to be available for incredibly cheap with accurate translations and in good quality online, Viz was offering an incredibly good deal. Weekly Shonen Jump Alpha would take over after the physical magazine ended, which had some of the newest chapters from the most popular manga in Japan. And it would last for a couple of years until it proved that individual titles being published to Viz's website proved to be far more streamlined instead. Viz would go on to publish more One Piece at a steady, close distance behind Japan, often about a year to a year and a half, with sometimes it being under a year. Viz would continue to give new volumes, arc titles and colors, such as purple and pink for Impel Down, and orange and red for Paramount War. Seeing as Viz was more or less caught up with Japan now, titling future arcs would prove to be a bit difficult, as they no longer had the hindsight they once had to separate each title and arc. So that meant Fishman Island, Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Zoe, and Whole Cake Island are all labeled as New World, with a gold and blue color scheme. That's why the New World theme lasts for 28 volumes, and thankfully, Viz would be a little bit smarter about Wano and Egghead. And then out of nowhere in January 2012, Color Walk 2 released, just a little over 6 years after Color Walk 1. That was a really long time to wait for Color Walk 2, but it looked like Viz was ready to resume releasing the Color Walks, only to be met with radio silence once again. And then in late 2013, Viz would start compiling One Piece volumes into box sets, with the first one consisting of volumes 1 to 23, and the following sets also consisting of about 23 volumes each. The MSRP makes these box sets about the same if you were to buy each volume individually, but they often go on sale for far below MSRP, so it's ultimately a great deal. And the packaging is really nice too. There's even some bonus content included in these box sets as well, such as the Wanted one-shots, Cross Epoch, the One Piece and Toriko crossover, Chapter 0 Strong World, posters, and various interviews. In October 2015, Naruto released Volume 72, its final volume. So now with Viz's flagship title now finished, that meant that some Naruto fans are willing to give One Piece a try in an attempt to fill the void. This would boost One Piece just a little bit more during the 2010s. One Piece would continue releasing business as usual throughout the 2010s, but besides some one-shots that Viz could bundle in as a bonus with the box sets, they still seemed to be avoiding any supplemental material, such as art books and spin-offs. That is, until 2018. After yet another 6-year period of silence, Viz tried releasing the Color Walks yet again, but this time they were 3-in-1 hardcover compendiums. These are super high quality, and I'm glad that we finally got them. I don't know whatever was going on with Viz in 2005 and in 2012. I guess each individual color walk underperformed. But regardless, I'm glad Viz started to release these in a timely manner. And now all we need to do is just wait for more to be published in Japan, so we can get the next compendium. One Piece would get an even bigger boost once the Wano arc began, as Toei upped the animation quality quite a bit. Then during the pandemic, Netflix added One Piece, and lots of people who otherwise didn't want to give One Piece a try, usually because of its length, decided to give it a go. Now One Piece Volume 1 is listed as one of the best books of 2021, and now since anime was bigger than ever, therefore so was manga, and now One Piece was given new life. Since One Piece got a huge boost from the pandemic, Viz started to release supplemental material such as the Ace's Story novels, the Sanji Cookbook, Shokugeki no Sanji, and the Ace's Story manga. Really interesting how Ace and Sanji seem to be the ones getting a lot of focus outside of the main story, huh? And now, most recently, Wanted was released, which is a compilation of some of Oda's one-shots before One Piece. It really surprises me that it's taken this long to release it. It released in Japan in 1998, and in November 2024 in the US. I actually ended up buying the Japanese tankobon for Wanted back in 2006 because it seemed like an English version wouldn't ever release. And I can't believe it's been nearly 20 years since then. As I was working on this very video, Viz announced an English version of Law's Story, which will be localized and released in the fall of this year. So, even after this video, there will still be more One Piece material released by Viz in the future. We just don't know what they're up to exactly. Personally, I would love to see the data books. That'd be pretty sweet. As of this video in 2025, One Piece in the US is just 1 year behind Japan, with Volume 110 being the most recent volume in Japan, and Volume 107 being the most recent in the US. The newest chapters are available to read on Viz's website every Sunday, or at least when a new chapter drops, which is at the same time it releases during that following Monday in Japan. It is really incredible just how we've come such a long way since the days of being 30 plus volumes behind and having to rely on poor quality scanlations. As more and more time passed, the impact the 4Kids dub had on the anime community as a whole has faded, with old audiences giving it a second chance and a younger generation of fans reading it for the first time. It may have taken about 15 to 20 years, but One Piece is now definitely one of the best-selling manga in the US. Man, I remember hoping to see One Piece appear just once on the New York Times' best-selling graphic novels list for any given week. And if a single volume just happened to show up at the bottom of the list, I was happy. That was good enough for me. And now, all this time later, they consistently rank near the top when a new volume releases. That's amazing progress, and I knew One Piece had that potential since I got into it in the mid-2000s. Hell, if I told my jaded, younger self that my favorite series, One Piece, would no longer be underdog and get the recognition it finally deserves, I wouldn't have believed it. But it makes sense though, because the impact the 4Kids dub had only delayed the inevitable. It was never a matter of if One Piece gets popular, it was a matter of when One Piece gets popular. That just about does it for One Piece's manga in the USA. And if you liked this video, be sure to check out my History of One Piece in the USA videos, which focus primarily on the anime. You can find them here in this playlist on the screen, with just 2 videos as of now that cover the 4Kids era and the early Funimation era. But there's so much more to come, so stay tuned. And make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for watching. Matane.